committee meeting for Tuesday, October 11th. We're in room 1010. Councilmember Zine, Councilmember Englander. We expect Councilmember Koretz.
I have not received any word.
He's not coming? Well, there's a second one he's missed, I think. Not that we're keeping track. We have 3 items on the agenda.
For the record, I'm glad that I'm here. Good. As long as we're not keeping track. Sorry.
We are keeping track. We are keeping track. Committees are important to send. Okay, 1, 2, and 3. Let's start with number 1.
Item number 1, City Controller Report relative to the follow-up audit in connection with the city's billings and collections practices.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Rick DeGucci from the Controller's Office.
Take it away.
Okay. This audit was issued in July 2010. The purpose of this follow-up was to assess departmental progress in implementing 35 recommendations from an audit report issued in 2007 on citywide billings and collections. In addition, we followed up on 7 recommendations related to billings and collection issues from a 2007 audit of LAPD's fiscal operations. Some of the findings from the 2007 audit were that at any one point in time, the city was unable to accurately determine the amount of its accounts receivables.
The city did not know how much people owed it.
Not until year end.
Okay.
All the receivables are reported at year end by departments.
But they do know at the end of the year.
Yes.
Okay. Fiscal year or calendar year?
Fiscal year.
Okay.
Secondly, departments had not submitted numerous old uncollectible accounts for write-off. For example, we identified numerous accounts that were over 10 years old that were on the department's books.
And they just carried them year to year as money owed?
Yes. So in other words, the financial statements were showing a large balance for accounts receivable, and a lot of that amount was showing as allowance for uncollectible accounts. I seem to recall it was like about 300 to 400 million that was listed as uncollectible accounts
300 to 400 million.
in the city's financial statements. And then lastly, billings were not occurring timely. The follow-up audit found that several improvements have been made. First of all, the mayor now requires departments to submit quarterly reports on billings and collections. The city council also approved the referral of emergency medical service billings to collection agencies, which should increase the amount collected on those accounts. And then lastly, certain parking citations are also now referred for collection. The audit found that some problems still remain. For example, there were a lack of procedures to ensure that a billing occurred for each service provided. And also, interest and penalties have remained inconsistent. In fact, none of the departments in our studies have charged interest. And then for penalties, they vary widely, anywhere from 0% to 50%, even within the same department. For example, fire department has a penalty of 50% on brush clearance and high-rise inspections, and 0% on fire safety watches and emergency inspections. As part of our follow-up process, we've been tracking the outstanding 17 recommendations as of the date of the follow-up audit. It's now down to about 8 or 9 outstanding recommendations.
Now, were all departments audited or just certain departments?
It was just certain departments. There were about 5. Well, the initial audit was about 5 or 6.
So we can anticipate, if we were to calculate this out, this would be duplicated in many departments.
I would imagine a lot of departments would have similar problems, yes.
And we wonder why we're broke. Did it ever show any liens put on properties where people owed money and didn't pay?
Not to our recollection. I don't know if that's happened.
So in other words, don't pay, it's okay, no problem. Just skate away.
Yeah, Office of Finance might be able to answer the question about the liens.
Okay, I got some questions for finance. So I know that there was, Office of Finance, we'll talk about that with them. There was a position established within the CAO's office, someone to collect. Was that ever implemented that you found?
I just spoke to Office of Finance this morning, and they said it had not been filled yet.
And that was recommended and approved months ago. That we'd have basically a collection sheriff, someone who would go out and collect the money. So that hasn't been done. And we're facing a $250 million deficit July 1st of next year. And we still aren't collecting money that's rightfully due the taxpayers in the city of Los Angeles.
Correct.
Okay. Any questions, Mr. Englander?
Yeah, I've got a couple, thank you. So we haven't, you'd mentioned that the departments have not charged interest in these cases.
Yes, again, during the initial audit in 2007, we went to probably half a dozen departments. And those departments, I think except for Convention Center, was not charging interest.
But the, under our administrative code, under collections, and under the contracts, and citations and permits, it all states that interest is billable if it's late. Is that correct?
Yes, in the citywide guidelines, it says
Okay.
interest.
I'd like to see the general manager's report back directly to this committee, to the chair, on their failure to invoice correctly the interest and what they're doing immediately to resolve that issue. Is there a guesstimate, not of total dollars outstanding, but how much of the outstanding balances the city would be receiving, or is due to receive, or should have been receiving, had the city billed the interest?
That would have to be estimated. Again, we know the total accounts receivable in the city's financial statements is the...
But they're receivable on, different periods of time. Some are immediately receivable, some have been sitting on the books,
Yes.
as you said, for many years.
Yeah, so it would have to be like an aging type report.
Okay. If there's a way to break that out, I think it's important, but I'd like to have an instruction back to those general managers who have not been billing interest to find out what, in fact, they're doing now, and if that has been changed in their practices. My next question is on the balances that are referred to collections. I understand we only refer balances that are over $5,000 to collections. Is that the common practice?
I believe that's the current practice. During our audit, it was $1,500.
It was $1,500?
It was raised to $5,000.
It was raised, departments are required to refer balances under $5,000 to an outside collection agency, is my understanding. Is that correct? Do we send amounts under $5,000 to outside collection agencies?
Yes.
Mr. Englander, if I can clarify.
Who are you?
Jeffrey Whitmore, the revenue manager for the city. Basically, accounts that are under $5,000, there is an interface between individual departments and our outside collection agencies. Those accounts go directly to the collection agency. Those accounts that have a balance of $5,000 or greater are kept in-house. We have staff that serve as collectors, finance collection investigators, and they effectuate collections on those individual accounts.
What's the percent, okay, so then what's the percentage of collections of the ones that go to outside agencies for collections versus the ones that are in-house? Do we know?
It will vary from year to year, and it has been problematic because it's sometimes an apples to oranges comparison. The internal collection percentages are generally higher, but at the same time, the accounts that are referred to the outside collection agencies tend to be older sometimes and more difficult to collect upon. So it's difficult to draw an apples-to-apples comparison.
Our overall collection rate, then let me ask you that. Our overall citywide collection rate for late or outstanding balances, not just collections, not billable collections, but the late collections that either are taken in-house where that are considered delinquent, or the ones that go to outside agencies that are considered delinquent, is roughly what, 53%?
Of the accounts?
Of the 53% collected?
No, I'm not sure specifically what you're referencing. You're saying
I'm
the collection
referencing the
rate?
committee report that says the city's overall collection rate for those years was approximately 53% based on the audit.
This is Todd Bowie with Austin. I think that they're referencing a specific department in that report. It may not state it clearly there, but I think they may have been referring to either fire or transportation, parking citations or EMS billings specifically, but not necessarily citywide.
Where are we at citywide?
Citywide, well, in terms of citywide outstanding balance, you're looking at about $600 million outstanding amounts receivable. About half of that is probably over 2 years old. And so you have a pretty significant age balance of accounts.
And of those over 2 years old, approximately 300 million, give or take,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Of those, how many are in-house and how many are on outside, with an outside agency? Do we know?
I would say a fair amount of it is with the outside, or sorry, is being conducted directly by the outside collection. A lot of the over 5,000 accounts tend to be tax receivables, and those are generally being handled directly by Office of Finance.
Do we have a breakdown anywhere that shows some of these agings in more detail?
We do. We do track those by the age of the individual accounts. So we know basically how many of those accounts are 30, 60, 90 days to 365, et cetera, et cetera.
We issue a quarterly report. I can send you a copy of that. We'll have another one coming out in the next week or so, too. And it'll break down every different account type, non-tax accounts receivable type.
I'd like to see that. So to ask more intelligible questions, to actually really get ingrained and understand and lift the covers up, if you will, to look at how we can improve, it would be best to know where those deficiencies lie. So you stated that you have a quarterly report.
Mm-hmm.
Does each department, I remember this in the audit as well, that the departments didn't necessarily submit the required quarterly reports. Are they doing that now? And if not, which departments have failed to do so?
They have, but I'll ask Mr. Bowie to comment, because one of the things that we're in the process of doing is developing a new tracking system that's going to be implemented at the end of the year. So perhaps you can touch upon that.
I would say as of late, so over the past 3 or 4 times that we produce a report, departments have been very compliant with the requirements. And in fact, it's expanded and in terms of what they're required to do and the level of detail. Simultaneously, we're developing a system, a module of the new financial management system, and that's basically allowing us to interface with all the various account receivable systems throughout the city. And so they're going to be sending in data feeds through this system where we'll have pretty much close to real-time tracking on a very detailed level of all the accounts receivable virtually of the city. With a few possible exceptions, but for the most part, most of these account types will be coming in through that system.
Okay, but in the meantime, it's still been a requirement of all the city departments to submit quarterly financials with the accounts receivable statements and outstanding statements.
Yes.
And not all of those departments have been in compliance. Is that correct?
Traditionally, there have been certainly exceptions, but correct me if I'm wrong, I think at the last quarter, everyone was in compliance.
Yeah, most recently, everyone has submitted. There's a few variations there still in terms of what we'd like to see, but it's 99% there.
Okay. And and what's the latest on the fire department's EMS outside billing? What's the status on that?
There is a representation here, and they are very much underway with their new system, but they could probably elaborate for you further.
Good morning, Councilman. My name is Salvador Martinez, Fire Department. We're happy to report that we're on target to collect our $67 million for this fiscal year. As you know, the actual contract started in November of 2010, so last year was just partially we had them under the development and then actual implementation. We also partnered with Sancho, was the other contractor that dealt with the data collectors that automated it, and they were fully implemented as of June of last year. So this will be the first year we're fully implemented from July onward, but right now we're on target to collect our 67 million that we had stated we would collect.
So when you say, so that's when they are treating or when they're on site at an incident, they collect the information electronically at that point, or they're still doing it manually?
No, they're collecting. It's it's all electronic. The manual forms are no longer used or needed, and we are getting faster turnaround time because of that. And that was one of the benefits we had alluded to when we went forth with the contract. So that's one of the main reasons we're able to collect the amount of the increase. Prior to the adoption of these two contractors, we were collecting about 58 million, so we jumped up from 58 to 67.
Okay, and do we invoice or do we bill for site and release or treat and release?
You mean treat non-transport?
Treat non-transport?
No, we do not. We don't
Do any cities do that?
Some do, and with varying success. We've dealt with our partner Intermedics about that. We looked at it, and we determined that for us, it would not be having a separate treat non-transfer fee would not be profitable, because we've already incorporated the cost for providing that fee into our base ALS, BLS fees.
But then it would lower the base
Yes.
transport.
Yes, it would if we did a separate treat non-transport fee. You're absolutely correct.
Right. So, and it wouldn't be feasible because we transport everybody under the Clausen protocols? Is that what they
We
determined?
transport those that are required and requested. Those who we have refused to transport, we do not.
Required or requested? Do we? Well, I believe we only transport, just for the record, those who we don't transport those who refuse. That's simply that's all we do.
Right.
We transport everybody unless they refuse,
Yes.
which is a difference.
Yes.
Okay. We'll have to look at that. That's all the questions I've got right now.
They were going to charge when they went and gave a Band-Aid at the scene. They were going to charge that individual in addition to if they transport. If they didn't transport, there'd still be a charge. I remember that during the discussions that they proposed. I don't know if it was ever implemented, but I thought it was the process, the procedure that if an RA
You're right,
unit...
Councilman, it was discussed, but since it falls in the treat non-transport, we would not treat them if they were provided a Band-Aid or some other aid. And
Because that was discussed during budget, and I remember specifically, I said, you're going to charge if they come and give them a Band-Aid? Yeah. And I don't know if that's been included in the budget, because sometimes these funny numbers appear. But they're not, they're only charging if they transport.
Correct.
So if they go there and they give the person a Band-Aid or a glass of water, whatever, there's no charge for that.
That's correct. That's our current operations.
Yeah, but my understanding, though, just on the record on that, is that they transport all unless you refuse transportation. Unless you refuse, you shall refuse and sign that you've refused transport.
And that's the liability clause then? To alleviate liability, okay.
Oh, as long as we're on fire, real quick, on the underground storage hazard permits, I understand there was an issue on the audit as well, that there was a failure to invoice in a timely manner. It was running at approximately at least 1 month late, which, according to the audit, determined to be roughly $13,000 a month, if assuming a 2% interest rate. Have they fixed that issue?
Yes, they have, and we should be recouping all our past costs on prior billings, sir.
Anything else? Okay. Do we ever put a lien on someone's property that doesn't pay the bill? And how does that process work if we use it?
Yes, we do. There are right now only 4 departments that utilize the lien process, Building and Safety, Housing, the Fire Department, and the Office of Finance. We have recently initiated a lien program, but it is on business assets for a particular business that's delinquent. So that has turned out to be a very, very fruitful program.
What about
for
the
us.
property? Why not the property? Put a lien on the property so they can't sell it and get out from under what they owe.
Again, the Office of Finances are basically based on business assets, so we have imposed liens in some cases. The other departments, it is specifically related to a tangible physical property. So I could not give you specific figures as to how many liens they've imposed, but there is a process in place with Building and Safety, Fire Department, and Housing.
I know in the Coachella Valley Palm Springs area, the Coachella Valley Water District, if you are 2 months late on your bill, and your bill is $25 or more, they'll put a lien on your property. They're very serious about, and their water rates are a lot less than what we have here in Los Angeles. They're very serious about collecting the money, and I'm wondering why we can't implement when people don't pay, and obviously we give them an opportunity to pay, and they have an asset like the real property, why we can't put a lien on it. Law enforcement seizes property all the time from drug dealers. They'll take their planes and expensive cars, and they seize that under the asset forfeiture. I'm wondering why we don't become a little more aggressive, since $300 to $400 million. It just amazes me that if someone owed you money, you'd collect the money, I am sure. Somehow the city, yeah, I'd like those eyes going up. I would too. It seems like it just kind of write it off. It just amazes me that we're not aggressive. And I'm not talking about cheating people. I'm just talking about you pay the services. You know, if you've got a water and power bill and you don't pay it, there's consequences. You don't pay your gas bill, there's consequences. You know, they're going to shut it off. And then you have to pay to get it turned back on. I mean, other departments other entities, I say government agencies, seem to be a little more responsive. You don't pay your phone bill, and your phone's going to get shut down. I don't know why we can't develop an attitude, just pay what you rightfully owe us, and everything will be fine. It seems very basic and simple. Maybe it's too basic and simple.
Your point is very well taken. The lien process is very intensive in terms of time and commitment, but we found it to be a very valuable tool. So we continue to talk to departments and work with them to try to encourage them to use this more aggressively. It is a good tool.
Because I think we have a city attorney's office that's very aggressive in collecting revenues that are due the city. And no interest in penalties. It seems absurd that we're not charging interest and penalties. If you're not paying your bill, you know, if you don't pay your DMV, when you get your DMV renewal, it says how much it is, $200. If you're 60 days late, 100 days late, it tells you exactly how much you're going to pay. You either have the option to pay now, and if you don't get it, you don't get your tag, and then you get stopped, and then your car gets impounded for an unregistered vehicle. Then you got to pay the impound fee and the citation. So, I mean, it seems that other governmental agencies have consequences, and we want to be good-hearted people, but we still have to pay the bills to run this government. And the projection is, and we had it today in council, it's $250 million deficit facing July 1st. So that means furloughs, that means no pay raises, that means fewer services. I mean, it's obvious that we need to tighten up collecting money that's rightfully owed us. And if not charging interest or penalties, then heck, I won't pay it. See, we need to like impose that. And some of these departments, there's no interest or penalty. The fire department, I see that on the brush clearance, it's more the administrative fee than it is to clear the brush. Because we see those that come into public safety. You know, the brush clearance may be $300, and the penalty is $900 for the administrative fee. And people come to this committee in this room, and they have to pay that bill, period. It just seems that there's been a lackadaisical, I'm not blaming you gentlemen.
Thank you.
And we're the policymakers that somehow need to spark some interest in saying, let's get this money that's rightfully due so we can do the services that we promise the people will do. On the outside, when it goes to collection, what percent do we actually, say they owe $100, how much do we get out of the $100 versus the collection agency? So if it's $100 that we're going to collect, which is just a figure to bring it up.
Well, understand it's a contingency fee. So if the actual bill outstanding is $100, the collection agency adds their contingency fee on top of that. So they'll collect the $100 plus their fee. So the city is made whole.
So we'll get the $100.
Absolutely.
We're not getting like 10 cents on a dollar.
No.
Okay. And then $600 million outstanding, 2 years old. So a lot of this that you mentioned has been carried over year after year after year. When do we finally write this off and say, you know what, we're not going to collect it, we're not going to seize it, we're not going to lien it, it's money that is gone?
And this has been an ongoing issue because you hear that big number of $600 million, which we've said time and time again is not real money. One of the things we're looking forward to is working with some of the departments with large balances of outstanding receivables to get much of that written off. I hate to use them as an example, but it's probably the obvious one with the fire department. They've had a large outstanding balance for a long time, but part of it is an accounting process. We know that through Medi-Cal and Medicare agreements. For instance, if they bill $1,004 for a medical transport, but we're contractually obliged to accept $450 or whatever it is, that balance was still being billed and accumulated, but we know we were never going to receive that money. So they have been very aggressive in changing their accounting procedures, and we're very much looking forward to a very large write-off coming up with the fire department soon. They've been anxious to send us a huge write-off, but we're dealing with issues with the city attorney right now related to HIPAA, which is confidentiality issues of medical records. And they're making a determination whether or not the Board of Review, which is the body that reviews these for write-off, can even look at the material because of confidentiality material,
Couldn't they look at it without
confidentiality
finding
issues.
what they were treated for? There's John Smith and...
Well, no, I mean, we don't get any of that, but there are opinions that if we even get as much as an invoice number, that may be in violation of HIPAA. So we are waiting for a determination from the city attorney that hopefully is going to come within the next 2 or 3 weeks. And hopefully, if it comes in the way I anticipate and hope, we'll be able to write off, $150 million quickly.
And develop new financial system. How much does it cost us to develop that new financial system?
So that's probably what I was referencing a bit ago about the module that they're building. I think the contracted cost was about $500,000, give or take.
And we'll bring in millions.
Well, it'll monitor millions. I don't know.
Monitor
if it'll
millions, yeah.
generate
Hopefully,
anything,
with 500,000, we should bring in something. Have we ever, and I've been thinking about creative, looking at Mr. T. Fank with his career in law enforcement. If you go out and you go to a store and you take something and you walk out, it's petty theft. You put a gun to a guy's head and you take a pack of gum, and then that's robbery, force or fear. Have we ever thought of embezzlement on some of these people who have collected money that's due to the city and filed criminal reports on them for embezzlement of public funds? For example, the parking lot owners. They've collected the 10% tax, our money, they collect. They're embezzling money that the city should be receiving. Have we ever thought about going on a criminal sanction and arresting a couple of them for embezzlement? It may be a little bizarre, but it might get some attention.
I'm not sure about the embezzlement issue, but you may or may not know, I mean, there's been obviously one highly publicized incident where criminal charges were filed against a parking lot operator and prison time imposed, as well as going after them civilly for the recovery. So those are being taken much more seriously and much more aggressively. I think everybody recognizes the issue with parking lot operators in particular. And how we have to really bring the resources to bear to make sure they're in compliance, because they're accepting the city's money.
Right.
It's not theirs, it's ours.
That's why I say embezzlement. They're taking money. It's like if they sell the parking spot or lease the parking, rent or whatever, they're paying for that spot, $5, $10, whatever. But then we impose that 10% tax. They're collecting that tax on behalf of the city of Los Angeles and keeping that, which basically they're embezzling dollars that should come to us.
And I think it filters very quickly through the parking lot operator community exactly what's going on, and the city really has taken a much stronger stance in relation to receiving those. So I don't have any details for you, statistics today, but from what I understand,
We're getting their attention?
we're getting their attention. Thank you.
Because I think Mr. T. Fank would be more than happy to go out and put some handcuffs on them, and Harrietta would be happy to book them. Well, you still have the right to do something. No, I'm just thinking that if we don't get serious with it to try and say these dollars are owed us, I mean, $23 million is a lot of money, and that's what we believe they owe us. And there's always the truth of what they owe us versus what we believe, which is probably a conservative number. Say, you know what, folks, enough. You've been playing the game for too long. And somehow, to keep the city running, you got maybe 500 people that are now camped out in City Hall on the grass, north and south, who don't have a job, who want to have a job, who want to benefit what most of us benefit. And there's a lot of people who don't have it, and then these other people are ripping us off, which they're ripping off every taxpayer, including those folks that are camped out at City Hall. The submit to controller, when we submit reports to the controller, we'd like them to submit to this committee also. I think we need to be in the loop with that, and I'm working with Controller Gruhl. But I think that when the reports go, because we're very cognizant of the dollars and the cents, and to keep it honest and keep it balanced, so we would request that those reports come to this also. So the amount currently owed to the city, which is sitting in collections, 300 to 400, 600? The numbers that we could say we really are tangible versus the numbers we know we're never going to collect.
You know, that's difficult for me to give with any degree of comfort, because I know Todd gave a number which seems incredibly high. I think probably in the next few months we'll be in a position to give you, once these write-offs occur,
Okay.
we'll be in a position to give you a much more accurate balance of that.
So currently owed the city that we believe we can collect versus something that's 10 years old that obviously we're not going to collect something that's 10 years old. And do we file actions in court, civil actions?
Ongoing basis. I mean, we have 2 courses of action. We have a unit that goes to small claims court for smaller claims weekly on a regular basis. And we have a city attorney referral program where cases are identified that would require some kind of civil action, and they are transferred to the city attorney's office on a regular basis.
So we are pursuing that avenue.
Absolutely. That's,
Okay. So what is the status of implementing all of Controller's recommendations? What are some of the delays that you have encountered in implementing efficiencies to help us collect the money? So implementing all the Controller's recommendations, what do we look at with that?
Well, let me make one qualifying statement before we go into that, because we're here dealing with the controller recommendations, but there have been a number of recommendations that have come to us through the core commission, through the Macias Consulting Group, through various council motions, all of which we're monitoring, some of which are very close in nature, and we have basically a tracking system that we developed for all of those. So we update that on a regular basis.
All the recommendations.
All of those recommendations. And on a quarterly basis, we disseminate those. We certainly can put you on the distribution for that. But we are keeping a very close monitoring of all of those. Some of which it's difficult to say they're implemented 100%, because some will never be, in the sense, a couple of issues. Some we don't really agree with, and in some cases they're contingent upon, as we said, system development,
Right.
And those kind of things. So we're making great progress, and I don't know if Todd has some additional comments.
I think one of the more significant ones, as you both pointed out, was with regard to penalty and interest application. And that's really something that finance has established for the receivables that it bills, but we need to get other departments to do it relative to their own receivables, and their various impacted ordinances need to be updated to allow them to do that.
So there are some departments that if you owe $100, we want the $100, and there's no other penalty or interest, the $100.
Yeah, that's correct.
Is that majority of the departments, what do you think?
I would say, yeah, a pretty fair amount.
So there's no incentive of paying now or paying later?
Yeah, in that regard, although some may have some reasons for not doing it, but I think that's what we need to ferret out too, is so what we're preparing right now, and we have another quarterly update pending with some 100 or so items that we're tasked with tracking, and so this is one of them, will be this penalty interest. And so what we're proposing to do is to coordinate that activity with all the various departments, have them identify each and every receivable type, what interest or penalty is applied, why isn't it
across the board?
Yeah, by receivable type. So it'll be, there's like 150 or so it's pretty vast. But we're going to coordinate that. We've been talking to the city attorney a bit about that, and we're going to have them identify who's responsible, who's their business person that deals with this, who is the city attorney they deal with, what is it that they apply or don't apply, and why or why not. And then from that'll give us their starting point for starting to get them to move.
And we don't want that so we can write off more. We want that so we can collect more.
Yeah.
So when you're not
Correct.
paying, you're going to have consequences for that. Okay, I like that one. What's the status, central account receivable recording? That's the system you're working on now.
Yes, that's scheduled. The system will be should be up and running in December, and then it's a matter of getting all the different interfaces built into it. We should have about half of them built around that same time, with departments that weren't able to get it done within that time frame. Will be coming online January onward.
And the Inspector General, Revenue Manager, we haven't hired anyone.
Last that I'm aware of, it was advertised as a position for city employees, and that's the last I've heard of it. That was several weeks back, I believe, that position was open and the timeline expired.
Because I look at you gentlemen as collectors. So I don't understand what this Inspector General Revenue Manager is going to do that we can't do with our existing staff of personnel. I mean, that's what you folks do.
I think it is very similar. Maybe it's just the fact of having an extra body and extra.
I think we gave you an extra
spotlight.
body. But it just amazes me that we try to create a position when we have a department. I'd rather give you the dollars and the personnel to say, go out there and do it. I mean, that's what the finance does, I would think. I see you smiling. Did you apply for that spot?
No comment.
All right, so here's what I want to do. Penny, any other questions for my colleague?
Just one more. In hearing all of this, $600 million is a lot. I would think that a lot of that is on the front end, not necessarily the back end. Some of it on the back end in terms of collections and billings and making sure the reports are submitted on time, making sure that on certainly the fire side that we're complying with HEPA laws and not writing and being able to write off that deficiency that we are collecting from the medical side. But the other side of that is on business taxes and other fees and parking occupancy taxes and all the things that have been discussed. I don't know if we make it easy enough or if we're business friendly enough for people or resident friendly enough for people or customers to pay these bills. There's different departments that handle billing all different ways. I don't know if there's a uniform system where you can pay everything or anything on a credit card. I know, for example, that there are some counters for billing and safety for permits that allow credit card payments, and then there are others for things like conditions on whether they are Quimby fees or others that can't be paid by credit cards. And this day and age when people are utilizing credit cards because then they can make their payment and they know that they either have a payment system or an affinity program or they have another means of spreading that payment out and dealing with it on their own without getting the penalties and interest. I mean, once we've made it difficult where we say pay all up front, period, you can't be late or you're going to get these late fees and penalties, we're going to send it to collections, and we're going to make it difficult and you have to write a check. We're going into a checkless society where people are so used to paying with things either on their credit card or even on their cell phone now. There's an app for that nowadays. And I don't know if we've really evolved into looking at a holistic approach citywide in all the different departments, the way we collect money to make it easier for our consumers, for our customers, for our businesses, for our residents to actually make that payment up front, on the spot, electronically. And I don't know if we've come to that. I'd like to ask if the chairman would entertain me in this motion of looking for a report back on what departments, where we can improve in terms of electronic payment on all fees, whether, no matter what those might be. On all fees, anytime there's a revenue stream to the city of LA, whether it's a tax or a fee. I don't know, can you answer the question if a business can pay their business taxes with a credit card? Do we know that?
Well, there is no master system. There are individual departments and
they're all different.
That you can do that at times. But your point is well taken. I think that has been identified as one of the things that came up in the Macias consulting report, that we need to facilitate that kind of payment option. If you owe money for a delinquent library book as well as your water bill, et cetera, that you be able to go online and just take care of that.
And we should have at least just one page on the city's webpage for payments. So no matter what, if you were renewing a dog license or a horse license fee, if you were paying your Quimby fees, if you were paying for a permit, if you were paying because you had a large storage tank and you owned a gas station and you wanted to quickly just pay it online, you can go to the city's friendly website on one page where you have either a pull-down menu or you can type in the ID number of the payment and simply pay electronically with your direct bank number or by credit card. And I think since we haven't kept up with that, I'd like, if you would,
Why don't we find out?
to report back to this committee with ways to implement. If that was identified in the audit, I think that's critical, because the more we can get that payment up front and make it easier and friendlier, the less we're going to have the discussion on the back end about collections and penalties and fees and interest and write-offs and failure to collect.
But do all departments accept credit card for payment?
No.
No.
They don't.
I think a fair amount have online payment options. I don't recall exactly if that entails online checks or credit cards or.
But they don't all
check
ha- they don't all
cards.
have
They
it.
definitely don't all have.
Mr. T. Fank, does the police department accept a credit card for alarm permits, et cetera?
For alarm permits, those can be renewed online.
Yeah, but
Any
can you do-
permit.
Can you do the charge? Can you charge on your credit card online?
Yes, sir, you can. Any renewal of a permit, you can do online.
Okay.
As far as a false alarm billing, the paper bill is mailed out, the remittance is back to finance. We have talked with the Office of Finance about developing a payment portal so individuals could pay that. That would be Office of Finance. We're not the collector of the money, we bill, but
Can you-
clearly would support that.
But can you pay that with a credit card, or do you have to send a check?
That would be the Office of Finance. I would defer to Office of Finance.
Do you
if they
take
can
credit
pay.
cards?
They can pay with credit card.
Because I know, like, when you have your phone bills, or American Express, whatever, you can pay credit card on the phone. I mean, most, as Mr. Englander says, I'm just wondering why we haven't jumped into this arena where, whether it's an app or something else, we want to collect the dollars. That's what finance does, collect the dollars. We have the funds to run the city. So maybe we need it back. How do we bring all departments online so they can accept credit card payment for any and all services that the city provides?
Let me say two things. I mean, we have actually seen presentations from companies that provide a similar kind of service. But of course, this has to be integrated into our financial management system, which ironically all departments don't use. So it goes beyond just saying identifying it. We still need to get everybody on the same page in terms of systems and the ability to access it.
How many departments are integrated into the system now?
Well,
Well, in terms of like who is using the financial management system that was recently implemented for accounts receivable, it's a small handful of
Which ones are they?
departments. It's like planning department is using it, the city clerk is using it, Public Works Board of Accounting is using it, and some others are using it for small volumes. The zoo is using it, DOT is using it.
So those ones that are using it now, do those ones that are integrated into the new FMS system, do those ones have the capability, or have they started to migrate into a friendly format where they can accept electronic payment online?
I don't think we're ready for that yet. I mean, in the sense that, yes, we identify it, it's the need, but there are issues, of course, that with the implementation of any system has to be worked out. The financial earmarking of funds to purchase a system and make it work. So I'm not sure.
I don't want to oversimplify it, but most of this technology that didn't even have one back end or backbone system was well in play many, many years ago, and that's how the .com industry came into effect, quite frankly, and how you have companies like Amazon or eBay that are all electronic, where they have warehouses all over the world and they ship direct. They have one portal that take the information, and many of those were not built on that backbone. They integrated them after the fact, but that ability to take the funds up front and make it user-friendly and user-accessible and customer service-friendly is critically important, not now so more than ever, particularly when we hear about $600 million in outstanding billings and collections in this paper system that's completely antiquated and archaic, that are coming back and trying to figure out how to collect or write off this bad debt. It's absurd. And where we've invested millions of dollars into improving our financial management system, and we've got some departments now that are implemented into that backbone system, which is great, but the departments themselves are not up to speed with accepting perhaps electronic payments up front and making it user-friendly. I think this is a grave mistake, and this is critical, and it's incredible that we're actually having the conversation in 2011, where we're trying to figure out where you can buy a cup of coffee or almost anything with a cell phone now, and there's an app for that where you can go online to purchase almost any type of product or service imaginable, some even probably illegal, and it doesn't matter. You can buy it all online, but when you want to do business with the City of LA, we're just not set up for it because it's a technology problem. That to me sounds more like an unwillingness on perhaps the departments, not the Department of Finance, that has been pushing forward on FMS and pushing forward with the controller, which is great, so we have it on the back end. But I don't think there's any reason at all that we can sit here in this day and age and say that, no, I'm sorry, you can't pay that fee online. That's ridiculous and makes no sense. So instead of introducing a motion here in the committee, I'll bring a motion soon to council. I'll ask that the chairman of this committee co-author that with me as well, and trying to bring the City of Los Angeles into the information age and the customer service age, so we don't have these discussions on bad debt in the future, and allow people to pay these things easier from their living room couch, in their pajamas, over the phone, whatever that might be, to make it easier for folks to pay these things, so they don't have to take the burden of penalties and interest and the fear of it going to collections or on a lien on their property.
The city's 230 years old, and unfortunately, some of the technology has gotten away from us, and we're way behind the curve. I just think the Department of Transportation, they're converting all the parking meters to credit card. You go to the parking credit card, and I'm sure you're going to find the collections going up because it's very convenient. We're a credit society. So I think that what my colleague says, I'd be happy to co-author that with you. It's long overdue, but if you look at how many programs we could have implemented to make your job easier, it's collecting the revenue, and the public that has to pay the tab, you know what, it's a lot easier. I know when I get my American Express, I call that 800 number, I give them the approval, bam, it's done. A lot of people do it online. I like to call up and do it that way, but the bottom line is it's automated, and I think our process is way behind the curve. Maybe we need IT to get involved in it, because IT is obviously an integral part of it. So, you know, we used to ride horses around, now we drive cars and motorcycles and sit in traffic all day, and technology has changed. And I don't criticize you gentlemen, but somehow the city has not kept up with the times as far as technology. And I think that may help eliminate some of the outstanding debt. So let's continue this for 30 days. Instruct the Office of Finance to report back with a current amount of money which is currently owed, including which departments the debt belongs to. So we want to identify those departments. I know the controller did a few of the departments, and I'm sure there's many more that we want to be able to bring forward and have their general managers answer the tough questions. Why aren't they collecting? And instruct the CA to provide a full status of the Inspector General or Revenue Manager, since it hasn't been implemented, and it was months ago that it was approved in council. What's exactly the status of that? But I want to thank you, gentlemen, being here on answering these questions. Again, we're not criticizing you. You're working, but you know, if we give you a task and you don't have the tools to do the task, then it's difficult to make that happen. We're trying to get the tools so you can do that task. Thank you very much. So let's go to number 2. That'll be approved by me and my colleague.
Item number 2, City Controller reports relative to follow-up audit in connection with the Office of the Treasurer.
All right. This will be about the consolidation.
That's correct.
All right.
Good afternoon. My name is Wale Oyewole. I'm with City Controller's Office. The Controller's Office issued a follow-up audit of a management audit of the Office of the Treasurer on February 15, 2011. The original audit was conducted back in 2005. The objective of the follow-up was to evaluate how well the Treasurer Office has implemented key recommendations from the 2005 audit. The follow-up focused specifically on 6 key recommendations related to staffing, organization structure, the IAC, Investment Advisory Committee, cash management practices, and computer information systems. Our follow-up audit determined that the Treasurer's Office had implemented or made significant progress on all of the 6 recommendations that we followed up on. The treasurer had fully met the intent of the 4 recommendations, while there were 2 remaining recommendations related to organization structure and system consolidation. The 2 key recommendations of the follow-up was basically for the city to consolidate the treasury with revenue, Office of Finance. This is now completed. There's a second portion of that recommendation, though, was for the city to explore the feasibility of consolidating debt management functions as well in one office. That remains outstanding. There's also one other issue that remains, and that is related to the integration of the server system that the Treasurer's Office uses now. Although at the time of the audit, the Treasurer's Office has eliminated some of the old systems that were there back in 2005 and consolidated some of those, the department still relies on several outdated and standalone systems. So the Office of Finance rep is here. It might be able to talk about the remaining recommendation.
So has the full consolidation been completed?
Yeah, Jan Zatorsky, Office of Finance. In accordance with the ordinance that the council approved, August 17th was the effective date of the consolidation. We've made a few physical moves of some of our system staff and personnel staff, but generally most of the Treasury staff is still in the Treasury office, and we're in the process of hiring some key middle management positions like a Director of Cash Management Services and a Departmental Chief Accountant.
And what about the cost savings through the consolidation?
It was estimated to be right around $1 million. We deleted approximately 8 positions.
Eliminated 8?
8.
Okay. And the consolidation, so it seems to be working?
Yeah, seems to be working so far. It would be our recommendation on that debt management consolidation that we give it some time, however, for finance to work, you know, and understand all the Treasury functions before we make a recommendation on the debt management function.
Okay. Consolidation, all debt management to one office. And how will that work? The debt management into one office?
Well, we haven't really proposed. I think the audit showed the different places where debt is managed in the city, primarily the city administrative office, Treasury, DWP sells some debt, some of the other proprietary, so there, kind of we need to look overall of, there's kind of a discrepancy right now whether, where it would be best placed.
So you're still working on it?
We're still working on it.
Okay, Ms. English?
Couple things. Thanks for coming.
Sure.
And sitting through the last discussion as well. I know you got a lot of busy things to do as well. The office, it seems to be, the consolidation seems to be going well, from your perspective.
It is, yes.
And with 2 general managers now working in one office, how does that working? What happened with that?
No, what happened was the treasurer position itself was deleted. And so Antoinette Christovel, our Director of Finance, basically serves as the Director of Finance and Treasurer. So it's really just one general manager for our department. And then we have 2 Assistant Directors of Finance. I'm one of the positions, and Ed Cabrera is our other Assistant Director of Finance that oversees a lot of the business tax issues.
When was the audit of the departments? When were they conducted?
The follow-up audit?
The first audit?
First
The
audit.
first audit was conducted in 2005.
2005?
Management audit.
Okay.
By the department.
And how many total employees do you have in both departments?
The combined total now is 380 employees. Treasury, we transferred 28 employees over to finance.
380?
380, yes.
380. That's a lot of people.
Yeah,
That's a big family.
it is.
380 people. Well, you got a lot
A lot
to
of
manage.
auditors and a lot of tax compliance officers.
I would think that the training and expertise, education, that each one of these employees, valuable employees to the city, is absolutely critical. I mean, this is the backbone of what is keeping our city alive. Some people can argue the term alive right now, but afloat, struggling. You guys are really the engine
Yeah.
in the boat, that's keeping it afloat.
Yeah, we agree. We perform a very important function in the
Critically
city.
important. I mean, a lot of people talk about public safety and the fire department, the police department, but the only way that they can function is to assure that our finances are in order, to make sure that we've got smart, credible people managing the books, making sure that we're constantly innovating and bringing in new technologies, whether it's on the collection side or the revenue side, or looking for best practices, thinking outside the box. Really, these 380 people need to work very, very closely together to ensure that they have the city's best interest at hand.
Yes, we agree, and I think that leads to the second recommendation about we are conducting a financial feasibility assessment with a contractor called Strategic Treasurer. At the year-end financial status report, some funds were appropriated to that at the request of the interim treasurer, and they're looking at an overall process, best management process, systems process, and they'll be actually coming on site next week to start that review.
I'm just trying to get a sense of this 380. How many different locations are you divided up into?
We have employees here in City Hall. First floor is one of our main central offices for collecting taxes. The gentlemen that were here at the table before me reside on the 12th floor of City Hall collecting revenue. Our executive offices are on the second floor. We have a floor at Garland Building that's predominantly all tax auditors and tax compliance officers, and then we have several field offices at our Van Nuys office, Hollywood office, West Los Angeles office, and we have offices in Watts, San Pedro, and Westchester that are open just a few days a week.
And would you say that most of these employees, the 380, stay once they get a job at one of those offices pretty much for almost their entire career, or do they move around often? Are they displaced quickly? Are they how often are they moved around?
Well, we've had a pretty good track record of maintaining our staff. We did a change to the tax compliance officer class. You used to be able to come in as a management analyst or management assistant and basically go and collect taxes, but then you got tired of it and you'd go to another department. So we created the tax compliance officer class, which
I would imagine just being a tax collector for the city of LA isn't all fun 8 to 10 hours a day.
some people are great at it.
Fun? Could be fun. Ben Design would enjoy it.
Like a coroner's investigator.
Okay. So, and with that, do all these employees interact often with each other? Or they sort of sit in a cubicle with a phone strapped to their head and a computer? Or do they talk about their best practices and ways to improve performance? Or how is that structured?
We have interaction. I mean, the auditors will train with the auditors. We have regular training for our audit staff. Same with the tax compliance staff. Whenever we have ordinance changes, recent exemptions for new businesses, we'll have training, and so they'll get a chance to interact.
The reason I'm asking all these questions is in the 2005 audit, it states the controller said the treasurer's office had a low morale and high employee turnover. And where I was going with that is we ask these questions often of our police officers. We have training about these very situations in moving officers around and working with other officers in the field. We often, you see in the news every single day, seems more lately than not, about the police department or fire department and lawsuits and harassment. And when you see in an audit, it sort of jumps off the page to me where it says low morale and high employee turnover. When you hear about a department such as the treasurer's office, the financial office of the city, the backbone of our city, having high turnover and low morale, that scares me to death because I don't think you get the attention publicly that you need, and I don't think those employees get the attention they deserve. And so has there been anything done to implement, and it's great to hear some of the achievements and cost savings in the consolidation and meeting the other issues of the audit. I think it's critically important as well to have good morale, whether it's with the city of LA, whether it's in private business. I'm happy to say, now I'm the newest council member, I took office July 1st, but let me take it back and say as the chief of staff for the last 8 years, so now you can say almost for 9 years, going on 9 years, we've had the lowest turnover of any council office in the last 9 years, year after year after year. I'm proud of that. I'm proud that we have high morale, people wanting to come to work, do good things, to be aggressive, to help make the city a great place. And when you see something that says low morale and high turnover, you lose institutional knowledge, things slip through the cracks, they're not processed, And that's sort of, I think, a cultural problem we've had in the lack of some management training and experience in management. Because I believe leadership comes from the top down. I believe that we've got to work together. And so what have we done in that 2000 audit since 2005? And now since 2005, those were during good economic times. Things have gotten much tougher, clearly. We've had with employee freezes and furloughs and layoffs and early retirement, and there's this fear of losing a job or being displaced or not being able to promote. So I understand morale being low now. This was done in 2005. What are we doing to recognize these outstanding employees? Is there ever an opportunity to find those shining stars in the 380 and bring them to council and say, hey, this is Joe Smith from accounting. He sits in a cubicle. He's been here for 9 years. And by the way, he created this efficiency within the department. I want the council to recognize him and say, because of that, the city has now saved $50,000 a year or $150,000 a year. What are we doing to find those shining stars and make examples out of them and improve morale? I know that's a long way to get to, but I think it's critically important. It's just as important as the finances of the city.
Yeah, and in the Office of Finance, actually, we do have a program. We call it our Outstanding Service Award Program. It was implemented by Ms. Christabel. It's been in place for over 10 years. And annually, each supervisor, we accept nominations, and 5 to 6 employees are recognized at a breakfast that the management pays for, and it's based on just what you said, efficiencies, improving, making a process improvement, doing something above and beyond the call of duty. We haven't brought them into council, but I may do that next year. And,
let's do it.
And do that. But we have plaques in our main offices, and they get a,
Do you have an Employee of the Month club?
Not of the month. This
No,
is an annual process that we do. And we also think that this consolidation is a good move for the employees that have been performing treasury functions, because we do think by folding them into this larger agency, they will have more opportunities for interaction, for more training. And, we completely agree with you that we want to maintain longevity and have people, stay with our
You hear a lot of, and our city employees and our city family hears often from the public and the media about overbloated pensions and payroll perks, and they hear a lot about that. What they don't hear far too often is about a lot of the good that some of these people are doing. A lot of these 380 employees are your neighbors and friends. These are people who have families that work tirelessly, that have done great things that we need to promote and let them know as well, because they hear it to and from work every day as well. When they're listening to the radio, they hear that they're worthless and overpaid bureaucrats that don't care about people. And it's just not true in all cases. There are a lot of outstanding folks that need to be recognized. So I wanted to point that out and find out exactly what you're doing to bring the morale up, because particularly in the Department of Finance, where it's extremely important. So,
Right.
Well,
Thank you.
the morale in the department, the treasurer doesn't matter anymore because that's no longer existing. That's right. And I see your staffer there's not even smiling, so if he's so happy to be here, why isn't he smiling?
He's always smiling.
Okay, thank you for that. And I think what the recommendation is to note and file and send to council. Okay, Mr.
Yes.
Engler? So that'll be the recommendation, note and file and send to council for final review. And number 3, Mr. Clerk, I just noticed there's no American flag in this room. Somehow it's disappeared. If we can find that we get one back here.
Okay,
We got the city flag, but there's no American flag in this.
Please contact Brad Sherman. He'll have a flag for us, I'm sure.
Paul, you know what happened to it? You know what happened to it? There used to be one here. It should be in this committee room. Okay, number 3, please.
Item number 3, City Controller reports relative to the City Administrative Officer monitoring the city's expenditure of American Recovery and Reinvestment Act funds and related matters.
Hello?
Hello.
What do you have to say about our,
Quite a bit. I'll try to make this a good, quick summary for you. My name is Cynthia Varela. I'm with the Controller's Office. The Controller issued this report on January 14th, 2011, And this review was done in conjunction with the ERA audits that were conducted at the Department of Public Works and Department of Transportation. This was an assessment of the CAO's role to help ensure that the city meets the requirements for transparency and accountability in the management of ERA funds. The intent of the review was to assist CAO management in ensuring that ERA funds were utilized in accordance with the Recovery Act requirements and that the city and its residents receive the greatest benefit of these funds while minimizing the risks. At the time of the audit, the city had not established an overall goal for the number of created or retained jobs that should be achieved with ERA funding. Individual ERA grants contained estimates of the number of jobs to be created or retained, and our audits of Public Works and Department of Transportation had noted some problems with estimating and calculating the jobs created with ERA funding. This was early on in the grant period. Since jobs are an important outcome of the ERA program, we recommended that the CAO ensure that city departments follow a consistent methodology for estimating jobs and clearly convey how the job data was determined and what it represents. Overall, we found that the systems implemented by the CAO are fairly effective in ensuring the transparency and accountability in the management of ERA grants. The CAO has a centralized database of ERA grants. They maintain a recovery website. They train and support departments to ensure ERA requirements are understood and complied with. However, our review disclosed several opportunities for the CAO to improve its ERA oversight, and I'll summarize those key findings now. We found that the city needs a specific, well-defined exit strategy for city employees that are retained to perform ERA-funded activities once the one-time funding ends. Otherwise, there's a risk that the fiscal burden to the general fund could significantly increase when the ERA funds are fully expended. We also noted that the CAO needs to strengthen its monitoring processes to obtain reasonable assurance that established targets will be met for ERA-funded projects that do not appear to be making adequate progress. CAO had initially planned to have a specialized team that would perform project management responsibilities, but staffing shortages and reductions precluded them from implementing this plan. With over $600 million in ERA awards, it's important that the city can be assured that projects and job creation and retention are progressing as intended. We noted the city must require departments to reimburse funds advanced by the general fund or commercial paper programs timely. When we did our audits of the Department of Transportation, we noted that ERA-funded transportation projects require front funding and then are reimbursed by Caltrans. For cash flow purposes, the city uses the commercial paper program known as MICLA to provide the short-term funding. What we found is that DOT was not making those reimbursements. Once they got the Caltrans reimbursement, they were not transferring the funds to the general fund in a timely manner. Lastly, we noted the CAO can improve the city's process for approving grant-funded projects by verifying that departments appropriately planned or budgeted ERA-funded projects and programs at the time of application. With ERA, there were very quick turnaround times for grant applications, and in some cases, the CAO received copies of the applications after the departments had already submitted the documents to the grantor. As a result, the CAO could not check the reasonableness of the job numbers or the project costs. In our DOT and Public Works ERA audits, we identified that preliminary cost estimates did not include overhead or indirect costs. We felt this process flaw could result in the city's leaders not knowing actual project costs, direct and indirect costs, when making decisions related to pursuing ERA funding. In June, the CAO submitted its plans for implementing the 5 recommendations that were specifically directed to their office, as well as the 1 recommendation directed to the mayor. Based on the CAO's response, we consider 4 of the recommendations implemented, 1 recommendation not implemented, but it's contingent on their presenting a strategy to this committee for approval on the exit strategy for retained positions. There was also 1 recommendation that the CAO disagreed with, which dealt with verifying the plans and budgets of the departments at the time of application when they actually apply for the ERA funds. Given the short application time frame and that actual awards may differ from the amounts requested, the CAO believes its fiscal analysis should be done at the time of grant acceptance. That's a little bit different in the process flow.
That it?
That's it.
Okay. A lot of recommendations. $630 million in funding. How much have we spent? And did we lose any funding due to reporting requirements? $630 million.
Councilmember Tyler Munhall with the CAO. As of August of this year, we've spent about 54% of the funds. 88% are spent and committed.
88% of the total?
Yes.
What about the remaining?
The remaining are for contracts that have not been executed yet.
How long do we have to do that?
Most of the grants have until September of next year.
So we should be in the right time frame? And how many people totally have we employed?
This is an estimate, but as of August, we had employed full-time. These are a full 12-month job, 2,410 jobs.
So 2,410 people have a job that they didn't have before?
That would include retained or created jobs. So the jobs may not have been new, they may have been saved.
Something that was going to be terminated was continued, okay.
Yes.
And the question regarding the exit strategy, do we have an exit strategy when these funds are depleted for the 2,410 people? Or is it just, thank you very much, the project's done and you're gone? Join the camp out at City Hall.
Right.
I mean, realistically, if they don't have a job, I don't know where they're going to go, paying the bills. But do we have a strategy for that, or don't we?
What we proposed to the controller was, we have a set of questions in our attachment that we propose asking departments to provide us answers to.
Have they done that?
No, we wanted to find out if you were okay with these questions and if you had any other things you wanted to know so we could ask all at the same time.
What page is that on?
It's page 1 of attachment 1 to our response.
How much money did you say was the total that we received?
630.
As of August, because it had changed, I think, a little bit since the audit,
611,568. Okay, controller recommendation 1. CAO should develop a strategy plan. CAO states confirm expected date. Describe any.
Item 1 we've done.
Okay, so we got the confirm expected date that our funding will end. Okay, then describe any existing plans for funding after our funding ends. Either okay, if alternative funding sources are identified. No future alternative funding sources are identified for our alternative position. Determine if the position will be. Yeah. Okay, this is reasonable.
Okay.
Yeah, we should support that.
The other part of our recommendation is that any layoffs or any, let's say there's an R project that the city policymakers you want to continue.
We should lay off the mayor's people. Mayor people don't need to get involved.
Okay.
Oh, he just came in to defend himself. Hey, Jim.
Okay, Jim.
I just said I saw you walking in. You can come up and join us. I was just ribbing you to see if you were paying attention as we just have someone else joining us from the mayor's office. Go ahead. Identify, please, for the record.
We just recommend
Wait,
that.
go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Good afternoon, Jim Clark, Director of Federal Relations and part of the Mayor's ARA team.
Thank you. Thank you for showing up, Jim. We were just discussing this item number 3 regarding the ARA funding and the positions, et cetera, and some of the recommendations. So go ahead and continue now. We have Jim here.
Just simply, we'll go out and ask the departments for this, and we can do a report back. We think that any layoffs or change or continuing of programs after our funding ends, assuming there's other funds identified, should be considered as part of the overall budgeting process and not in isolation, because it could create conflicting decisions or confusion with employees. If there were a separate process for R, it should all be part of the budgeting process, the normal budgeting process.
But the folks are hired under the understanding that it's a temporary position. They're given that at the time they're hired on, and that if we can absorb them into the workforce at a later date because of retirements or whatever, but if we're facing a 200, 250 deficit July 1st, there may not be any opportunity. So we're giving them the information up front. So it's not all of a sudden they show up and say, by the way, the funding's gone and you're gone. So we're not going to do that to people. Okay. Do we anticipate the government giving us any more type of funding, the ARA funding, Jim? I know that you've dealt with this in the past.
The only thing that there seems to be any kind of possible consensus on is surface transportation reauthorization, which would include money for transportation projects, which would be a big help to us for America Fast Forward, because there would be funding in there for us for those projects. But it would also be for various road and street projects as well, too. But as far as a second stimulus, the Senate just voted down the American Jobs Act as a whole today.
Oh,
They just
down.
did that, yes. So what they're going to have to do is come back in a piecemeal manner. So some things will get passed, some things won't get passed.
So the president couldn't get that through?
Couldn't get it through. They've left the vote still open right now, so I don't know what the final vote count was, but they were hoping to see if they could at least get even 51 votes for it. There's 53 Democrats, and a number of the Democrats weren't even going to support
really?
it. Yeah.
Okay, well, people are looking for work, obviously, everywhere. That wouldn't, if we got anything on surface, that wouldn't impede with Measure R. Our Measure R is totally separate.
No, in fact, that would benefit it, because included, Senator Boxer's put a provision in her bill which would provide a $1 billion fund for what's called the TIFIA program, which is a way in which you can leverage basically $30 for every $1 of federal guarantee with commercial going out on the commercial market. And so we would be able to use a considerable portion of that to help fund our America Fast Forward projects. And of course, that's what we're trying to do to accelerate the Measure R funding.
And the problem with Measure R or any other type of program is once that project's complete, and we don't have anything to follow up with it, then those folks don't have a position.
That's correct. But we're even in our best guess, we're looking at 10 years to do all of those projects, and that's just the public. And then there's highway projects and that too that could go out for the next 15 or 20 years.
Continue to give them a career in some type of a profession, actually put food on the table.
Well, one of the interesting things that we're actually looking at and starting to look at is not all these projects would start at once in terms of jobs as well, too. So what we should be doing now is working with the high schools and the community colleges to basically train our local people now, so that when some of these jobs come up 3 years, 4 years from now or whatever, that we've got people in position so we don't have to go out and bring somebody from outside the area in to do this work.
And then the other question, the spot check, verify the departments met their reporting requirements. Are we doing those spot checks?
We started that in the second quarter, and based on our check, we didn't find any problems. It looked like the subrecipients are reporting as they are supposed to. We'll continue doing those spot checks.
And I know the mayor is very concerned about the jobs and the unemployment rate, and to reduce unemployment rate and create anything and everything we can. So I know there's a strong emphasis on his trips to D.C. And Jim, you may have done some of those too, to try and get as many dollars as we can to get people back to work, which obviously stimulates the economy. The more people working, the more they're buying products and keeping everything moving forward. Especially, this is October, then you got November, then you got the holidays in December, and hopefully there'll be people who have money to go out and buy during that holiday season, which also sales tax and people employed. I mean, it's all part of the American thing about getting people to work, Mr. Englander.
Thank you. Once again, you stole my notes and questions, but so I'll
I didn't
defer to
see
some
it.
others.
You had-
No, it was
You're right, so
very,
far.
very thorough. Just a couple questions on the $611 million, or $472,000 roughly. We're at about 53% completion of those dollars, is that correct?
54%.
54%? And that's what's done, 54%. So that would be roughly $324 million spent?
It's $330 million. And forgive me,
There's the difference between my 1%.
this is as of July, so we're actually a little further along now. We'll have August shortly.
So of the $330 million, if we are, so that's roughly,
54%.
yeah, no, I got that. I'm trying to figure out how many jobs we've actually created or saved out of those in terms of the dollar value. Because you said you've identified 2,000 and change in jobs either saved, retained, or created, 2410, right?
It's important to remember now, not all the money goes to pay people.
Well, that would be $162,000 a year.
A lot of money goes for equipment and stuff.
For stuff?
Well, to give you an example, we received the largest grant for broadband. We got $7.5 million for broadband deployment. But in terms of actual jobs, it created one job. The reality of it was that most of that money...
That's a great paying job.
Yeah.
Can I have that job?
Most of that money went for the purchase of computers. Now, of course, somebody's got to manufacture those computers, and that's putting people to work, but we don't get to count those as part of the job. We only get to count the actual jobs that we're creating with the money that we use. It's also money that was being used to buy software and to purchase broadband.
Was there some kind of purchasing policy in place for these funds that they had to be purchased and the goods had to be purchased locally?
There's not for that, but there were Buy American provisions for most everything that were in there.
Well, no, I know, but I'm thinking locally for the city of L.A. I know locally is being redefined right now because locally means the county of Los Angeles, and we're looking at that. But right now, were there any policies in place for local purchasing at all? And if you're saying that the average job wasn't $162,000, then I don't know what the average salary was if you have those figures. But if you cut that in half, we're still talking about at 54%.
Yeah.
611 million spent, 305 million roughly were spent then on goods or services. Of those $300 million, how much of it was spent locally? Do we know?
We don't know. We'd have to report back on that.
I'd like to know that part of what we've spent that wasn't part of the salaries and benefit package. And I'm guessing, I'm just throwing a number out, I have no idea whatsoever, but let's assume that number's in half. At 300 million, it's probably a little higher than that, 300 to 400 million. And that will ensure that if we've got 54% completion and another, the balance of that, you said about 88% is encumbered, but not yet started.
Correct.
Which means those goods or services haven't yet been acquired, so that differential, and then the balance between that 88% and 100%, it's not too late to have a policy in place if we don't yet have one. Is that correct? For purchasing and services?
Of the money that is not really pinned down, there's 68 million in contracts. A lot of that will be local.
Well, I'd like to see that part of it, because if the stimulus package doesn't stimulate, if it retains some local jobs that we already had, didn't create new ones, and then we bought computers in China, it doesn't. So that's what I'm trying to get to, is where's the money going specifically to help stimulate our local economy? Because if those funds for goods and services are actually spent here locally, it's having
Positive impact.
it's going to have a multiplier effect, and exponentially will help the local economy. And if they're not, and we're buying things from out of state, it's not going to have the same direct benefit to us here locally.
The White House was out recently for a visit, and they were asking us to compile a list of the major purchases that we were making and who those vendors were, and so we're working on putting that together. And from the initial doing that, we found that most of the it seems like most of the purchases that we're making are local purchases.
So is
local within Southern
Is this report
California.
then, if approved by committee, subject to then go to the council right now? Is that the idea, or is it just a report back to the committee?
Approve it, send to council.
Approve it, okay. So when you come back to council, can I ask that you bring that report that you've been asked to submit to the White House anyway, to bring back to council? If we can note that in the committee file as well, to show where the goods and services are actually being spent, that part of the equation, as well as the jobs. Would be great.
The action would be to approve, send to council, instruct CAO to coordinate with all departments to report back on the plan that addresses the placement of city employees hired or retained for ARA-funded projects. Placement of city employees hired or retained. So we want to make sure that we're up front with those folks, ones that we can retain as long as possible. If it's 10 years, that's a long time. Okay. Anything else? Mr. Clerk?
That's it.
That's it. Thank you all very much. We are now.